I had worn the crown of Valdemar for 11 years, and in all that time I had never once been no one. I learned, in those years, that power is a kind of blindness. Every soul I met showed me what they thought I wanted to see. The bow held a beat too long, the voice pitched careful and smooth, the eyes that checked my expression before settling on their own. I did not blame them. King shapes the room he enters simply by entering it. But I was tired. Tired of performance, tired of curated loyalty, tired of looking at the world through glass that showed me only reflections of my own throne. So I did something my steward called reckless, and my wolf called necessary. I put on a worn riding cloak, patched at the left shoulder, pressed anywhere, and I rode west toward the border villages alone and unnamed. No guard, no title. My wolf had been quiet for years. Not absent. I could feel him, a patient heaviness behind my ribs. But silent in the way of a creature that has given up expecting something and learned bitterly to wait. I had done this once before, 3 years prior, in the eastern provinces. I found decent souls and honest grumblings and a healer who gave the same care to strangers as to lords. Unremarkable in the way that goodness, thinly spread, can be. None of it had made the coal in my chest do anything at all. I rode into Ashwick on the third evening, when the sky had gone, the color of iron, and the first real snow of the season was falling in earnest. Ashwick was small, 2 rows of stone and timber houses, a well, a mill that had seen better decades. Chandler, whose light was already doused for the night. I had no particular reason to stop there over Threnholm, half a league further. My horse had thrown a shoe, and the farrier was the last building on the southern row. I walked the horse down the lane, snow settling on my shoulders, breath clouding in the light that spilled from the nearest window. And then a door opened, and a woman came out with a basket of mended linens on her hip, moving quickly against the cold. She walked directly into my path. The linens went everywhere. She caught the basket before it hit the ground, and then looked at me. Not at the horse, not at the scattered cloth. Directly at my face, the way very few people do when they have just been inconvenienced by a stranger. Eyes were dark and calm. Snow had landed in her hair. She did not appear to be performing anything at all. "Your pardon," I said. "Horse is lame." "Brett is 2 doors down," she said, and then she looked at the linens, settling into the snow, and sighed the sigh of someone whose long day had just been extended by one more thing. Not dramatic, just tired. "I'll help," I said. She nodded once, as if she had taken a measure and found it acceptable, and we gathered the linens together in the snow. She thanked me without ceremony and went back inside. My wolf moved, not a surge, nothing violent. But it was the first time, in 3 years, he had shifted with something other than restlessness. A small, pointed attention, like a creature lifting its head at a sound it almost recognizes. The farrier's wife told me her name was Marin, a seamstress and mender, widowed 2 winters past. Kept to herself, but everyone in Ashwick brought her their torn things. The next morning, the road west was closed by a drift that would not shift until midday. I sat in the inn's common room and watched the village wake through the frosted window. I saw Marin cross the lane twice, once with a bundle left at an elder woman's door, once returning with empty hands. She did not seem to go anywhere. She didn't have a reason to be. By mid-morning, I had invented an errand. I will admit I made the torn seam in my riding cloak slightly worse before I knocked on her door. She opened it, looked at the seam, and opened the door wider, no ceremony. Her cottage was small and warm and cluttered in the way of working spaces, spools of thread in a dozen, colors, bolts of cloth against one wall, a fire she tended carefully, because wood was not cheap at the border in winter. She had me sit near it and fix the seam, with the economical movements of someone who has done a thing 10,000 times and needed no pride in it. We talked. Or rather, I talked and she worked and answered, and what struck me was that she was the same, precisely the same in those minutes as she had been in the lane the night before. Nothing adjusted for my presence, no voice pitched careful, no eyes checking my expression before she formed her own. She told me the road to Threnholm ran better on the east side of the river this time of year, the way she would have told any traveler. When I asked about family, she said no with plain simplicity, and did not dress it up or invite pity. When I asked about the village, she described it accurately. No complaint for its smallness, no apology for it either. When the cloak was mended, she told me what she charged. I paid it. I stood to go. and my wolf pressed forward behind my ribs so sharply I nearly stopped moving. Not aggression, recognition. The way you recognize a word in a language you thought you had forgotten. The inn has bad porridge, I said at the door. It always has, she said, winding thread back onto a spool. Brett's wife makes it. She knows it's bad. She doesn't care. I laughed. I could not remember the last time I had laughed. Without performing the laugh for a room, she invited me to eat with her at midday. She had made more than she needed and the snow was still coming down. And she said it without sentiment, without strategy, without any sense that it was anything but the most natural offer in the world. I accepted. We ate. She asked where I was from and I said the north. And she said she had heard the passes were beautiful when clear, and I said they were. She asked what I traded and I said horses and furs, and she nodded as if that were ordinary. Then, without particular feeling, she mentioned that Ashwick had grown quieter since the winter road tax had gone up, and that traders came through less often now, and that the chandler's wife had taken in mending over the winter to make the shortfall. She said it with no accusation. She did not know who had set the tax. The flatness of it landed in me like a stone dropped in still water, and I sat with it all afternoon. By evening I had made my decision. Not because I had planned to. Because something I had been carrying for 11 years had quietly, in that small warm cottage over ordinary stew, set itself down. I went back before the last light went. She was at her door, bringing in the day's work before the snow could ruin it. I waited until she had the linens in her arms, and then I took off the cloak. Not the riding cloak. The other one, the stranger's name, the unnamed traveler, the version of myself that carried no weight. I stood in the snow in front of her threshold and told her who I was. She was still for a long moment. The coal at the center of my chest, the one that had been dark for so long, that had caught the night before and burned quietly ever since, flared to full heat. The mate mark on my left wrist blazed gold through the leather cuff I had worn over it for 3 days. Lit the falling snow between us. She looked at the mark. She looked at my face. You tore your cloak on purpose, she said. Yes, a breath then, the road tax. I will look at it again, I said. I should have looked sooner. I had not knelt to anyone in 11 years of kingship. I knelt then, in the snow in front of her door, and I did not find it difficult. I am not asking you to come because I am king. I am asking because every wall I ever built kept the wrong things out. And you walked through all of them without trying. And I would like to spend the rest of my life making sure no one asks you to gather your linens from the snow alone. Marin stood in the threshold with the cold linens against her chest and the gold of the bond light between us, and she looked at me for a long time, not performing the decision, simply having it. And then she stepped forward and offered me her hand, to help me rise, just to give it. The way she had given everything else, without accounting for it, without asking what it was worth. I took it. I have been king of Valdenmoor for 16 years now. The road tax was revisited that same winter. Traders came through Ashwick again by spring. Marin still mends things others discard. She says the habit is older than the crown, and she sees no reason to give it up. I have learned, in the years she has been beside me, that the truest measure of a man is not what he does when the world is watching, what he is when no one knows his name. She knew that before she ever knew mine, and she has never stopped teaching me since.